Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. I apologize if my voice is a little bit raspy. I've actually volunteered recently for a gene therapy program conducted by the US military where they're basically trying to adapt humans for underwater combat. The side effect of this operation is that I might lose complete control over my vocal cords, and in their place, gills will basically develop and I will be able to breathe underwater. At which point then the military is probably going to arm me with a spear gun, and then, no dolphin will be able to escape my wrath. Anyway, it seems like on this channel, in my absence, there's been a lot of discussion about which Ben is better. On one hand, you have American Ben. On the other hand, you have British Ben. Now, I don't really like this conversation because I think we're focused on the wrong thing when we're trying to compare which Ben is better, because that's not really what Humanity First is about. It's not really about the fact that one Ben likes to eat people and the other one routinely drives on the wrong side of the road and is a danger to everyone around him. What we really should be focusing on is the fact that both Bens are human, and like most humans, they have flaws that I think they can help each other improve. We should also be focusing on the fact that one Alan is always going to be better than two Bens. Anyway, today we're going to be continuing our best Space Navy comparison series with a pretty interesting faction. They're quite different from the more human-centric factions that we've covered so far. This is actually going to be one of the first alien factions that I talk about, and not just any alien faction, but a coalition of different aliens that have joined together into one group. We, of course, are talking about the Covenant, which are basically the very thing this channel is fighting to eradicate. It's a faction that I hate so much that I'm going to get American Ben to do the Advantages version of this video, simply because I don't think I can spend an entire video talking about how good they are. And a lot of that is due to the fact that I don't really like aliens, but it's also due to the fact that despite the Covenant's advanced technology, they actually have a really backwards culture and society. So just a warning for those of you tuning in expecting us to break down the technical weaknesses of the Covenant Navy. Admittedly, their Navy actually has very few weaknesses from a technical standpoint, but instead what we're really going to be looking at is the cultural problems that the entire Covenant organization has. Now, there are certain people out there who are going to tell you that every culture we encounter should be respected, no matter what their values are, no matter what their beliefs or actions are. I say shenanigans to that. The Covenant are made up of a variety of different alien species, and they're actually segregated into different castes based on their race. In their case, there are definitely different racial traits between these different aliens. A jackal is most likely going to be smarter than a grunt, just like an elite will be physically less stronger than a brute. And before any of you Covenant sycophants reply that I'm not calling them by their native names, well, I'm a human, so they can all go to hell. Hashtag remember reach. Anyway, what this imposed caste system actually does is significantly decrease the efficiency of the Covenant military and Navy, and imposes many strict artificial divisions that puts this otherwise advanced force at a huge disadvantage. So the first problem we have is racial segregation. The Covenant were actually a spacefaring species. They didn't really have a home world. Instead, they had a home station that traveled from one world to another. Now, they were a pretty religious society, and they basically absorbed new cultures they encountered and forced them to adopt their religious practices. But instead of uplifting each alien race they encountered, a strict hierarchy was established based on values assigned to them by the prophet race. These weren't really intrinsic values based on the true potential of each one of these alien species. Instead, it was based on prejudice, stereotypes, and very shallow examinations of these cultures. For instance, you had species like the grunts, who were tier 6 civilizations stuck in the industrial age. When they were encountered by the Covenant, their world was actually on the brink of collapse due to some ecological disasters that they had encountered. The prophets and elites immediately classified them as a slave race, placing them at the bottom of their social hierarchy. They looked at the grunts' diminutive stature and laughable technological abilities, and didn't account for the fact that, as a species, they were far younger than the prophets and elites, and weren't necessarily inferior, but just didn't have enough time as a society to develop and advance to the level that they were at. As a matter of fact, both the prophets and elites' advanced technology wasn't due to their own intelligence or ability as species, but because of their interaction with the ancient forerunner races. So by forcing the grunts into slavery, they were actually limiting the potential of an entire race, which actually made a pretty large percentage of their entire society. The natural progression for highly advanced and efficient species is usually never slavery of organic beings, and that's because organic beings are naturally unable to cope with these kind of circumstances. It's far more efficient to use AI tech and machines to replace organic workers. Machines don't have the desires and biological impulses that organics did, and we're much better at doing quote-unquote slave work. And because of the suppression, slavery, and mistreatment, the grunts time and time again would rebel against the Covenant, which made them a really big security risk for the entire faction. This was especially a huge problem for the Covenant Navy because almost every ship employed grunts as basic security forces and maintenance crews. So as a Covenant leader, I not only have to worry about enemy forces in a battle, I also have to worry about the fact that my entire crew is made up of individuals who potentially could mutiny because of the mistreatment placed on them by my culture. So it goes without saying, having this caste system significantly decreased the efficiency of the Covenant Navy. The grunts were basically the equivalent of gang press sailors that the Royal British Navy used to use. The first Marines that were employed by the Empire weren't actually trained for storming beaches, but for ship security and preventing armed mutinies on their ship. Also, by creating a caste system, you naturally create barriers for advancement for certain races. For the lower races like the grunts and jackals, this created low morale. I mean, why would you risk your life in combat for the Covenant if, in fact, they are oppressing your entire race? As we've seen in our own history, typically free men make far more effective combatants than conscript forces that were deployed by dictators. Militaries made up of volunteers and free men typically have less to worry about when it comes to desertion and morale issues, while conscript armies spend a ridiculous amount of energy enforcing discipline and discouraging their soldiers from abandoning their duties. It was this lack of fear of their own soldiers that made free armies much more flexible in the battlefield because you have talented NCOs who had more control in the small unit level. The Covenant just didn't have this ability. The caste system also created natural infighting within the Covenant Navy. This is because it encouraged and exaggerated the differences between the different races to the point where each alien race fought for their own species rather than the Covenant as a whole. In 2462, decades before the human and Covenant First Contact War, tensions between the jackals and grunts reached an all-time high, so much so that on the Covenant home station of High Charity, the jackals poisoned a common recreational drug used by the grunts, which almost sterilized their entire population. In retaliation, their grunts attacked the jackals' nests and killed a lot of their eggs. The High Council, made up of elites and prophets, saw this as a minor annoyance and basically ignored this whole situation, which led to further rebellion by the grunts, who were generally just fed up with the situation. This was especially problematic for the Covenant Navy again because you actually had certain ships that were crewed by just one type of alien. First contact between the human and the Covenant was carried out by a jackal missionary ship, which was just like this. So when one alien race mutinies, you're not only worrying about infighting, but you're also worrying about losing a significant portion of your war material. This infighting eventually led to an all-out Covenant civil war known as the Great Schism, and it's not all that surprising. After the Prophet of Regret, one of the leaders of the High Council, was killed by Master Chief, the elites assigned to protecting the Prophet was blamed for their lack of ability, and so the Prophet aliens replaced the elites with the more brutal and aggressive brutes, who had only just recently joined the Covenant. At the same time, the brutes replaced the elites in high command positions in the Covenant Navy and Army. They basically became field masters and ship masters overnight, which completely screwed up the entire command chain. Oh, and they did this in the middle of a war against the humans. The Covenant naturally underestimated human beings at the time. Our Navy was relatively weak in comparison to theirs. Our ships also lacked shields, we lacked true energy weapons, and used kinetic energy weapons and outdated projectiles. But the Covenant also underestimated humanity's natural ability to survive and also evolve in the face of great strife and adversity. We as a species have made great leaps and bounds in technology when we encountered any threats to our existence. What the Covenant didn't realize was that with each encounter with humanity, with each piece of technology that they lost to us, we were quickly learning and adapting their own technology into our own military force. A great example of this was the energy shield found on the Spartan II armor design. It was clearly reverse engineered from a Jackal's personal shield. While the UNSC Navy advanced in leaps and bounds during the Human Covenant War, The Covenant Navy's technology stagnated. The Covenant clearly underestimated humanity. Their only chance to really defeat us was a quick, swift blow before we were able to adopt their technology. Because at the end of the day, human culture is superior, far superior, to the Covenant's. By limiting an individual's station in life and ability to advance, they really made their culture stagnate. The Covenant Navy was full of officers appointed based on their race rather than their ability. While the grunts were physically quite pathetic, they were actually intelligent species. The notion that they were stupid again was caused by stereotypes and prejudice from the elite class and prophet class. After centuries of suppression, it was just expected that the grunts would be subversive and quiet. But we've seen, as with the case of grunts like the Deacon Dab, that grunts could be quite intelligent when allowed to. The same could be said about the jackals, who were quite intelligent as well. But by limiting high command positions only to elites and brutes, the Covenant were also imposing limits to their own recruitment pools and overlooking talented grunts and jackals. Now, the Covenant government is a theocracy. This means that religion dictated the rules and laws of their governance, and that affected everything in Covenant society all the way down to its navy. Now, we've already mentioned many times, during the Covenant Human War, humanity advanced very quickly while the Covenant forces basically stagnated. This wasn't just due to infighting in the Covenant Navy, but because of how their entire society functioned and was structured around the worship of an extinct alien race known as the Forerunners. Most Covenant technology was derived from, or as they thought, gifted to them by the Forerunners. By placing this mystical and religious connotation to things like energy shields, plasma cannons, and slipstream generators, it prevents proper scientific research from being conducted on them. As humans find out relatively quickly, their Forerunners weren't gods, but a flawed species of aliens, and at a biological level were no more special than the Covenant or the humans. Again, I can't help but draw correlations between the sci-fi universe and our own actual real world. We've seen time and time again nations that don't have a separation between religion and state have huge societal and economic problems. Countries like Iran, Sudan, Yemen, and Afghanistan all are at a severe disadvantage on a global stage because of this. It's not that religion is bad, or even that it's bad for society. There are many positive things that religion brings along with it. But a theocracy is fundamentally flawed because its basic rules are judged by religion, and religion, at its core is a very abstract idea. Every individual interprets their relationship with religion from different points of view. And then again, you have individuals who aren't religious at all, and they basically don't fit in your theocratic system in that way. Which is why theocracies are rarely established on a predictable and fair set of rules and laws, and usually have oppressive directives aimed to quell dissenters and portions of the population. And that's exactly what the Covenant theocratic government does. It places its own people into religious castes. It also limits their technological discoveries and abilities, and it's also started a holy war against humanity, which is never a good idea. And to cap things off, the religion that this theocratic government is based on is completely false and completely misunderstands who the Forerunners actually were. The first two species to encounter the remnants of Forerunner tech in the Covenant were the prophets and the elites. The elites had a more hands-off, don't-touch-it approach while dealing with the Forerunners, while the prophets incorporated Forerunner tech into their own military, which is why they were able to defeat the elites when they first contacted them. But again, the prophets, biologically speaking, didn't possess superior intelligence at all. If anything, they were quite stupid and closed-minded based on their actions. For one, they completely misunderstood the purpose of the Forerunners and the purpose of the halo arrays. They thought that the halo arrays were the pathway to their salvation, when in fact it was just a gigantic superweapon that was designed to destroy all sentient life in the galaxy in order to prevent the spread of the Flood. This was something that Master Chief and Cortana were able to figure out literally days after first encountering a halo ring. This is also why the prophets saw humanity as such a threat to them. We basically proved that their whole religious society was bogus, and that includes their caste system, which is the only thing really keeping the prophets in power. The Covenant were really just first adopters of Forerunner technology. Instead of creating value and progress with that technology, they sought to control other beings and suppress other beings in order to protect their own power. This is why the Covenant are evil and their society is completely flawed. So guys, those are the 10 flaws with the Covenant Navy. If you want to see more technical information about the Covenant Navy and their individual ships, I'm sure Ben is going to be talking about that when he discusses their advantages because, you know, in all honesty, they have a very advanced Navy. That's the truth. Also, guys, don't forget to rate the Covenant in this video right now. You're going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, and we're going to be using that rating to finally determine which faction wins our best Space Navy series. Anyway, guys, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of the series. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.